Hello, hello, welcome, welcome today. Please type in the chat where you're joining from today. I see that some of you have already done so. If you're new to us, the invitation is to tell us how many people are watching with you and where you're from, including, if you're able, an acknowledgement of the native land which you occupy. If you do not know that information, you can go to native-land.ca. Again, please let us know who you are, how many are with you, and where you're coming from, including the native land which you occupy. I'll just start sharing who has already started to enter this room. So we have got Julie from Chicago, Jim from Oak Park, Margaret and Dawn from Oak Park. We have Jackie from Northern California. Welcome. Carolyn from Arlington Heights with kids. Lillian and Jameson. Welcome, all of you. We have Al in Arlington, Virginia, Piscataway lands. We have Patricia. If you have any tech issues, please click the green tech button in the lower right. If you can hear me. Philip, hi, thanks for being here. Monica from Skokie, Margaret and Dawn from Oak Park, Gina from Berwyn. Please keep checking on in here, but I will get us started. There's already 94 of us here together, which is very exciting. So I'm Anna Garcia Doyle, and I'm the Executive Director of One Earth Collective, which produces the One Earth Film Festival. Welcome to this festival screening event. We hope it will provide us all with rich opportunities for learning, a brave and safe space for important conversations, and a way to move from inspiration to action. We could not do this work without the support of our sponsors and partners. Special thanks today to First United Church of Oak Park. We gratefully welcome you to One Earth's 11th festival season, and we invite you to join us in turning the tide on our climate crisis. The festival uses the power of film to create a sea change on topics of environment and those intersected with environment, like racial, social, and economic justice. This year, we've adapted a hybrid format where all screenings are virtual, with some accompanying in-person events taking place in the Chicago area. Whether live or virtual, we remain committed to our unique model of gathering and community to raise awareness of the issues, engage in dialogue, and be inspired to act. A powerful image and call to collective action in light of this year's festival theme, Turn the Tide, are the words of Japanese writer Ryanosuke Satoru. Individually, we are one drop. Together, we are an ocean. Our event will take place in 4 parts. Soon, we'll introduce you to some folks who will help us have a rich discussion after the film. Then, we'll watch the film together. After the film, we'll unpack its themes in a facilitated dialogue with our panelists. Please use the chat to share your thoughts, ideas, or questions. We'll end by sharing concrete actions you can take to be part of the solution. These suggested actions come from our panelists and action partners. I'd now like to make a few brief acknowledgements. The first is that as we reframe narratives around justice, environment, and equitable solutions to our climate crisis, we acknowledge the many filmmakers, film subjects, facilitators, and panelists joining this and other fest events. Thank you. Your wisdom and experiences help us spark and sustain actions for the protection of our One Earth and for the just treatment of its resources and its people. The second acknowledgement is that One Earth Collective is based in Chicago, the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, and home to many other tribes, including today, peoples from over 100 tribal nations. Despite this, there are currently no federally recognized tribes in Illinois, due in part to colonization, relocation, and genocide. One Earth sustains its commitment to presenting films that center Indigenous stories and voices. We believe that beyond acknowledging the native lands we each occupy, we must lift up Indigenous voices and support the work of First Nations groups. If you're in the Chicago area, please support the important work being done by the American Indian Center Chicago, the Chicago American Indian Community Collaborative, Chi Nations Youth Council, and others. And watch for the Field Museum exhibition, Native Truths, Our Voices, Our Stories, co-curated with collaborators from more than 100 tribes, opening this May. A third acknowledgement is that shared agreements can help keep our conversations safe and respectful. Please observe the following agreements when participating. Put aside your preconceptions, acknowledge your privilege, internalize what you've learned, approach the conversation with respect, engage your active listening, use I statements, and get comfortable with your own story. One last thing before we meet our facilitator and program participants. If you're active on social media, tell people that this is happening. Amplify these voices and be a part of the community we're building here together. The hashtags for the festival are hashtag OEFF 2022 and hashtag Turn the Tide. And now I'd like to turn it over to our facilitator to introduce themselves, the panelists, and our film.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another powerful, amazing, thought-provoking One Earth Film Festival screening. My name is Toni Anderson. I am a consciousness engineer, urban ecologist, freedom curator, and Chicago native. I've founded two organizations, Sacred Keepers Sustainability Lab and Mindful Rant, which are two organizations dedicated to fostering transformative eco-social practice as a means of personal and societal change. I have successfully launched local and international place-based action projects, exploring linkages between climate, culture, and mindfulness. I am dedicated to examining serial placement disorder, migration history, public space activation as a revolutionary praxis. I believe in the transcendence and the transmuting of our oppressive narratives that space can hold within communities of color. And today, I am very excited to be here along with some other panelists that we're going to meet. One of the things that I love about the One Earth Festival model is many times we go and see powerful films and there's nobody to talk about it after the film is over other than maybe the people we came to the film with. But I love One Earth Film Festival because we have an opportunity to see these powerful films, connect to powerful narratives from the people who often direct and activate these films. So I'm really, really happy to be joining you to introduce two powerful films. Today we plan a thought-provoking post-conversation with two panelists, Rolando Favela from the Southwest Collective and Victor Short from Openlands. Let's get a hello from Victor and Rolando. Welcome. We're going to learn a whole lot more about them after our film is over. Today we're going to watch two movies, Here I Stand and Understory. And we are going to join Teresa Baker and a group of diverse outdoor leaders as they become the first members of the public to explore Harold Richardson Redwoods Reserve, a massive newly discovered old growth redwood grove recently protected by Save the Redwoods League. Everyone outside is focused on creating a more inclusive and culturally diverse outdoor community by elevating the profiles, work, and stories of marginalized athletes, leaders, organizations, affinity groups, as well as empowering minority members of our community by increasing access to essential outdoor skills and activities. The film was made in 2020 and is 11 minutes long. And please note, Here We Stand will be preceded by a 7-minute film, Sealing the Leak by Callie Dang, an honorable mention and official selection from the One Earth Young Filmmakers Contest. Woohoo! Big celebration for that, a big accomplishment. So we're looking forward to seeing that in the midst of our other two films. I welcome you to get comfortable, get your pen and paper out, take some notes, and be prepared to join us for a thought-provoking conversation. Make sure you turn those cell phones down, even if you're at home watching virtually, because we want to make sure that we have your full attention. And with no further ado, enjoy the film. Welcome. Wow, what a really powerful discussion, a movie. I'm so moved by it, and I want to know what's come up for you as you were watching. What are some significant images and words, phrases, ideas that you saw in this first film? Go ahead and pop your questions in the chat. I would love to see a couple of them and feedback. It was a very powerful moment for me to just see Teresa Baker kind of say, give it to me and let us out there. What are some of the things that really stood out for you? Someone said, wow, he said our disconnect is the reason and how we lose our identity. Yeah, that was a very powerful. Another powerful, Kim Tran says, I would love to visit that area, right? I would love to too. I was amazed that some of the trees were one tree was 1,600 years old. Debbie Bourbonnais from Bourbonnais, Illinois says, wow, amazing. Thank you for those doing this. I want to go see them. Yes. I have a deep tree hugger in me that would love to figure out a way to stretch my arms around those huge redwoods and give them a proper hug. And Julie says the use of the circle so everyone is included. Yes. One of the most powerful aspects is the idea of inclusivity in space. I want to give us a chance. These are wonderful comments. Keep them coming. I want to bring our amazing panelists back in and kind of get their voice in the room. First, I want to introduce Rolando Favela. He is a lead environmentalist for the Southwest Collective. Over the last few years, Rolando has worked with multiple community groups that tackle issues ranging from social to environmental injustices on the southwest side of Chicago. Through his work with these organizations, he has helped communities gain equitable access to desirable green spaces. Welcome, Rolando. I am very much looking forward to talking to you. And also, we have Victor Short, Forestry Field Supervisor for Openlands. Victor Short is the Forestry Field Supervisor and works with arborists, apprentices to achieve their first-year work goals. Victor believes that teaching apprentices about trees will help them learn more about the way they function in our ecosystem. Welcome, Victor. Thank you so much for joining us on our panel today. And we're going to go to the next film and we're going to have a rich discussion after that one. But I wanted to just kind of get your voices in the room for now. To ask you the question, there was this one moment where Teresa Baker says, give it to me. She wanted the ability to go into those redwoods and kind of do the programming that she thought was important. And one of the things that she said was, the reason that it was important is because there weren't any people that looked like her in those spaces. And what she said was, that's the why. That is her why. And so based on that, what's the why of your work? Why are you in the work that you do? And why is it important for you to be in the work that you're in? What's your why? And either one of you first.
I can jump in. So growing up, it was very industrial. To the north of me was I-55 and an oil refinery in Chicago. To the east of me was factories a mile deep. To the south of me was Midway Airport. And to the east was, hey, more factories going down to Central. And so we didn't have the green space. The closest park was about a mile away. And, being a 10, 12-year-old hiking a mile each way, that just wasn't realistic. And so we played in a vacant lot, which was also a fly-by-night dump site. So we didn't have this nature is almost romanticized or is exotic. And when thinking of nature, it's removed, it's over here. Nature, I've since come to change that. And I look forward to talking about what I think of nature now. But at the time, I'm over here trying to not get shot, and nature's far removed for me. It's almost exotic. And so looking back now, I want to. I don't want other children. My lived experience is something I should be working actively against, so that we have the green spaces, so we have the tree canopy to fight urban heat island effect. And so that's my why.
Thank you, Rolando. Powerful. Victor, what's your why?
Yeah, so my why is the environment I grew up in. I grew up in the Robert Chellis homes on the south side of Chicago. It wasn't very landscape savvy where I lived in the 90s, and where I grew up at. Almost to the point where I feel like that we didn't even deserve to have that type of environment with the landscape. It was always north of us or east of us or somewhere else on the boulevards in Bronzeville. when I first found out about the environment and started learning about trees, I was inspired that they were actually living like we were. You know, they have a vascular system and things like that. And just the lack of knowledge that I had at first, I wanted to spread that type of knowledge to future generations, because it was the not having the knowledge of what they do and what they function for, and that we had in our community was the reason why I wanted to push forward and just get in it and be a face for someone who looks like me, to understand that you don't have to be this type of person, that you can love trees and you can love where you come from in your environment.
Beautiful. Thank you, Victor. Another question, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked the audience. What stood out for you as you were watching this film, particularly as it relates to some of the work that you all are in?
I'm going to be a little bit of a wet blanket here. There's a few things I didn't like. First off, I have to recognize a privilege, because this area is outside or near San Francisco. I can't live in San Francisco. I can't go visit in San Francisco because I have children. And so, yeah, I could probably scrape enough, coins by and get a trip to San Francisco. But then my kids will suffer. They won't get certain resources. We supplement on top of the schoolwork that they do. We provide educational resources for them. So something will have to get cut for me to go to San Francisco and look at some trees. So there's certainly some privilege there. And her being able to say, give it to me. She has their educational resources. She has an ability to do that. And so I also didn't like that this romanticized version of what that nature is. For example, cottage gardens. People love cottage gardens. I think that is prime nature. Something forest is prime nature. So what about my nature on the Southwest side? Well, we have some of the most species-rich, dynamic areas like Douglas Park, where I did a birding course at Douglas Park, McKinley Park, Sherman Park, species rich in terms of wildlife, in terms of tree canopy. There's some arboretums down here. So we have nature here too, but it's seen as lesser than compared to these like forest, for example, or a swampland that's historic in Florida. So I think we need a seat at the table too, as urban dwellers. We have connections to nature too. We can go out and do some really good bird watching. We can do a tree count with Openlands. Does great work in the communities, coming into to communities, meeting people on their terms. Openlands is a wonderful partner with that. So yeah, in terms of what nature is and who's valuing nature and who's ranking this, I don't know, that kind of bothered me personally, but that's one soapbox, certainly.
Thank you, Rolando. It certainly can feel like it's an and, it's all of it. I certainly am always trying to get people to know that there's an exotic thing called the monarch butterfly that makes its journey through Chicago. And so there's a lot of beautiful exotic energy here in the urban city. And certainly we don't have to travel across the country to see a rare tree. We can sit right here in Chicago and see a rare phenomena, a rare migration phenomena. So thank you, Rolando, for calling our attention to this. This wild nature lives everywhere, and you can have access to it no matter where you are. What about you, Victor? What stood out for you?
Just the overall stigma, maybe, of trees. Not to go in a little different direction of what Rolando was talking about. I kind of looked at that as their story. Everyone has their story. Our story will be told. It is currently being told, and we will be expressed. We're getting better. We have the new advisory board and things like that. The Southwest Collective that we're working with now currently, planting trees and prioritizing those canopy covers, lands and things like that. We have our story to tell too. We just have to get there. I have no doubt. I'm true to stay positive that we will get to where we want to be, pointing at the good signs that we've already had so far. No, we will have challenges. We will have challenges. Who don't? But there'll always be challenges. I just feel like that I'll choose to take the positive notion on that one. I don't have doubt. I believe we'll push forward.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, it's a and trained at this point. We need all solutions on deck. The or and the binary way we've been thinking about this thing I think this is the time that we have an invitation to kind of allow all the things to be true, because we need all the things to be true. We need every story lifted. We need every story amplified. We need every story validated, because that's how we'll bring every story, this inclusive world that we want to see, requires us to lift up every single aspect of the work. So thank you for that, Victor. I know that we have another film to get to, and I certainly want to continue this amazing discussion. And we will get a chance to dig way more deeper into more after the next film. And I want to get to Understory audience. Please stay with us. We do want to have a rich dialogue after this, where we're going to chop a little bit more about Here I Stand with our panelists, and a little bit more about the Understory, which is what we're going to dive into now. And Understory follows 3 women who set sail on a 350-mile expedition through Alaska's massive Tongass National Forest. With individual connections to the rainforest, their goal is to explore how clear-cut logging in the coastal rainforest could affect local communities and our planet's climate, while taking audiences on a journey through the beautiful wild Tongass. The film was released in 2021 and is 40 minutes long. And I just want you to enjoy the film, get your popcorn re-upped, fill up your beverages, and stay tuned for another rich discussion with our panelists after we're over. Enjoy the film. Welcome back, everybody. I'm so glad that you stayed with us through the second film. I would love everyone to just take a hand and put it on your chest and just take a deep breath. Yeah, so often the things that are invisible to us are the things that we can easily take for granted. And we just breathed in oxygen, the oxygen that our trees and plant life produce on our planet. And so often our bodies just do it effortlessly, and it's just hanging out invisible in the air. And we don't notice that it's actually happening. So I just wanted to take a minute, as Sam said at the very beginning of the Tongass film, that there is gratitude here. And I just wanted to invite us into the space of gratitude for the air that we breathe before we begin this conversation. Thanks so much for staying with us. If you've got questions for our panelists, we're about to bring them back. Rolando Favela, with lead environmentalist for the Southwest Collective, and Victor Short, Forestry field supervisor with Openlands, will join us shortly. But if you've got questions, we'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and pop in our chat and get your questions for our panelists. The first thing that we want to do is invite you to tell us what some of the images and phrases and ideas that you are holding from the Tongass film. Go ahead and share those as well. And as we get centered in getting Rolando and Victor's voice back into the room, we'll wait for you to go ahead and pop those into our chat. I will ask the same question for Rolando and Victor. What are some of the things that stood out for you in the second film, Tongass?
Well, so some of the things that stood out for me was just their overall observation, the ambition to go out and do the things that they did, and the courage that they going through, just visualizing, and then bumping into that to seeing forestry and the logging industry and seeing it being removed and just caring about it. Like, it was. That was very inspirational. It was like seeing it twofold. It was a great expedition, but you had to see some of the harsh nightmares that come along with it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Thank you for that, Victor. What about you, Rolando?
Yeah, a lot of things, unfortunately, can happen in remote areas in the woods. And so not knowing if the freightermen are armed, or because they could justify, hey, someone was trying to rob us. And so the sheer bravery and will and determination that they displayed in the film was impressive. And sort of peeling back the curtain and showing folks, or in a sense, how the sausage is made is impactful as well. And like, a lot of times, I think we like our furniture, we like our wood products, but if we really got a sense of, saw the sights in person, smelled the smells of cleared out forest, walking in those steps, I think we'd reconsider some of our expenditures here.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to take some of the comments from our audience. And from Yorkville says each of us has the power to move the dial and to change the conversation, to care deeply and to do something. Thank you for that. Cindy G says elections matter a lot. I just want to cry when I see this stuff. I so feel you, Cindy. I want to cry too. Jennifer says, so sad, the devastation. Yeah, this can really be off-putting. I mean, we're looking at what feels like a lack of control over our environment happening right in front of us. Thank you for these comments, Jordan Burks. I think it was important to show the process of what's going on due to the fact that it is invisible to many people. So true. We talk about this invisibility again, and I really want to get into that because I think invisibility plays a big role in both of the films that we've watched. There was one point that Sam referenced something that they call ground truthing that really stood out for me. And this idea that you have to experience it to know it well. You have to get on the ground and get some truth, ground yourself in an actual truth. And I think about how much we don't know, what's invisible, only because we are kind of lazy in our pursuit of knowledge through a framework of ground truthing to actually getting close enough to something to really understand it. And I want to see how, if people were to ground truth in your worlds for a day, what is the thing that they would know well that is largely invisible that you believe really needs amplification in your work? I'll say it again. If we could get on the ground, if we could do a voyage through the life of your work, through the things that you experience in your communities, if we were to take a Sam journey through your personal Tungus, what would we see? What would be the truth that people could get grounded to?
Well, for me, I would say a lot of pushback that people and the negative feedback that they have with trees. A lot of times, often we see storm damage and people houses getting torn over and never the light of the good stuff that trees provide. It's the negative pushback. So ground truthing with us is going out, seeing people when we do community plantings who push back against trees in their neighborhood because of the negative influence, but not knowing the beneficial factors that come along with that. So that's what you would see in some of our everyday ground truthing.
Thank you, Victor. Powerful. Yeah, we do get a lot of negative feedback. These trees are a problem when they're on our driveways and on top of our houses. And rarely do we have people really championing the beauty of trees. Like, again, we just breathe it every day. It's invisible. We don't know this oxygen is the thing that these trees are providing for us. So beautiful ground truthing. Thank you, Victor. What about you, Rolando?
What came to mind is that we're a very industrial area, and so some think that these are job hubs that people are grateful for and that everyone in the area is employed by these folks, when in fact that came further from the truth. And so there is resource extraction can manifest itself in many ways. And in the industrial corridor, it manifests itself by traffic from residents, litter, infrastructure decay in roads, flooding due to these industrial areas. And so that's something that I don't think people make the connections to because they're removed for industrial corridors and they think that, they don't, it's waiting on a train isn't such a big deal because it's getting goods and commodities out to folks that need it throughout the Chicago metro area. But we're the ones that have to be delayed a half hour or so in some cases because of our rail. We don't have our grades at grade, the rail crossings at grade. We have to wait on the trains. There's no bridges or tunnels for cars to go under. And so we have to deal with that. We have semis going through our industrial or residential areas that we're down on us. The pollution is obvious, and I can't state enough. We're heavily polluted due to this industry, and I don't think that folks are making enough of a connection to that because they think it's a job hub or because people think that residents are grateful for these positions they find themselves in.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. We're always supposed to just be Grateful for our ability to just stand in a particular place at a particular time and forget the things that we might need, the environment may need to survive. I think about that in context of, I'm always a champion for the idea of space equity, and this idea that there is an eco-social design always playing out in every space. However, something always comes in and kind of governs and steals that equity from something else, whether it's a monarch butterfly, a tree, a Black youth. It could be anything that is coming in and determining a thing about a space. And from this idea of representation in space and giving space equity, because there's always this tension between what belongs and what doesn't, and who gets to make those determinations about what belongs and what doesn't belong in space, when naturally all things belong in space. However, we have just designed things that are inequitable to that reality. So why is it important that your particular representation is heard? And what happens when BIPOC communities and the things that they go through, particularly through environmental racism or green employment, all the things that we can think of, what happens when there's no equity? Can you talk a little bit about the long term? So, Victor, for example, we can say that when trees don't have equity, our environment suffers through flooding, et cetera. And so through your own experience, what happens when space is not equitable from your perspective?
Well, from my perspective, just looking at the southwest side, for example, and the canopy cover in that area, that area seems to be deprived of equity, of the plantings and stuff like that, and the canopy cover that it lacks, and the heat islands that it provides is like so I say overwhelming, and I think that's why it's important to set aside those equities for trees and things like that. That's why I think working in that area and doing those community plantings that we have and teaching people, not only doing the community plantings and planting those trees, but in administering the information about how to care for those trees, things that we hadn't done 100 years ago that we could do now for the next 100 years to kind of like create the carbon sequester, the benefits that happens with that you get from those trees, the cool shading, the tint that it provides, the equity that it provides for shoppers and things like that. When they come around, they tend to want to stay more. So just understanding the benefits that they do provide, and just setting aside that equity for spaces for trees and prioritizing. So I hate that has to be determined by Democrats and the Republicans and things like that when trees benefit all of us. So trees are not bipartisan. So we need to take that in consideration, that trees aren't bipartisan, so we shouldn't treat it as a bipartisan. We shouldn't have to elect a certain party or official to make sure that our sustainability is recognized.
Thank you, Victor. Great point. One of the things I think about, one of my youth in the program said to me that urban heat island affects crime in our city, and I said, "Well, how could that be?" And the idea that our crime statistics go up when there's big heat events in our city, which actually open up fire hydrants in our streets, which draw police and supervision and monitoring into our communities. And these tensions are always playing out. And so I think about when trees don't have equity in space, that it could have social ramifications as well as environmental. And our ability to see the connections between these things so that we can get related, it's a powerful narrative. So thank you for bringing our attention to like the equitable thing is not just because trees are a nice thing to go into our environment and we need them to breathe, but also what happens. And I think we can't get too deep on what happens, and continuing to ask ourselves what happens when space is not equitable. What about you, Rolando?
Considering that this is a part of a movie festival and we're watching 2 movies, of course, here, I'm going to channel my inner thespian and be a little dramatic. But hear me out, though. Hear me out. What happens is when we don't get this equity, people die slow, painful, mentally agonizing deaths. And I say that because when you look at cancer rates, when you look at political apathy, okay, when we don't get this equity, there's this thought that people don't care about us. So why should I care about community? Littering goes up, the infrastructure, of course, people don't care anymore. So when they don't see equity, they know what's happening. And so that has public health implications with cancer rates, with pollution, littering, but the mental health toll, I think, is something that's not talked about enough. We are overburdened mentally with folks not caring about us, with not getting resources to us. We notice the difference between the North and the South, the marginalized communities and the more affluent communities. We know the difference. And we know whether or not we live in one of those areas that's desirable or not desirable. We know that, and it has a toll, huge toll. And so, yeah, that's what comes to mind is the mental health, the public health implications of the inequities that we're seeing on community levels and it all ties into environmental consciousness.
Thank you for that. I'm thinking about myth busting while I'm watching this because, some of the things that I saw, particularly in the first film, Here We Stand, there's this myth, just like the myth that the senator, I believe, was saying on the floor, that it's a regenerative energy, it's a renewable resource. We can just cut these things down and it doesn't matter, they'll just grow back, but not understanding, the production of carbon and oxygen for mature trees versus new trees. And it's these sorts of myths, the idea that we'll lose jobs if we stop lumbering versus investing in other infrastructure that would allow us to create jobs in a renewable industry. It's those sorts of myths that I'm always trying to pick apart. And one of the other myths that I'd like to pick apart is this idea that people of color, BIPOC communities, are not engaged in sustainability, not engaged in environment, not engaged in nature. Talk a little bit about how you can help us bust these myths up today from your perspective.
So the second myth that you just mentioned about people of color being involved in sustainability, me starting to be on panels like this and showing that people of color are involved in this industry, just trying to get out there, because a lot of times I believe people of color shy away from those opportunities, or a lot of times may not be given those opportunities, but they are out there. I've been to conferences, I've been to many festivals, I've been to many plantings and volunteer events, and there are people that look like me out there. And may not be in groves or may not be in the numbers that we want, but they are out there.
Looks like we may have dropped Victor. And while we might wait for him to come back on and finish his thought, Rolando, why don't you take that question and tell us about some myth busting you might want to do on this?
I'm a fan of history, and so I would look back at people of the global majority and their relationships with nature, and we haven't left nature. And if we look at the history of resource exploitation, extraction, disinvestment, I think we'll find, thinking back to even ancient societies, the Vikings, where they basically extracted themselves to extinction. I think that's something that needs to be dealt with as far as myth busting, because we have a proven track record of working with the land. Africa making innovations in agriculture, the Aztecs making innovations in agriculture, versus other communities that have a record of maybe not doing so much good, maybe.
Absolutely. I think history is important. There's been tons of innovation throughout history on how communities of color, BIPOC communities, indigenous people have always had an innovative relationship with the environment and have been able to adapt to the Earth's changes over time. So thank you for that as well. Another thing, while we're still waiting on Victor to come on back, is this I want to get a little bit into the idea of how we can start to, from your work, you're kind of an earth ambassador, tree ambassador, people ambassador. We heard some things that are kind of like repositioning us in the beginning of the film on being grateful for what Earth and the planet and these trees have to offer us. Can you lift up some things that you would like for, our watchers to feel grateful for and in more protection of as a result of that gratitude?
I touched on this before, but being conscious of what your nature, what your environment is, whether or not it's your pocket garden in your backyard, take care of it, be the best garden and environmental steward that you could possibly be, whether it's advocating for your local park. They need resources, park district, they do the best that they can. Could always be better, of course, or if it's the forest preserves, they're looking to do new things as well. Just being an advocate for whatever it is you think is find your tribe, find your home, and then advocate for it. Be a champion for that, not just, I have to call it out. We can't just take, even if it is our local park, even if it is our little garden. We have to be environmental stewards and give back and amplify the work that's being done.
All right. A slow, painful, agonizing death, Rolando.
Or that, yeah.
If we don't get it.
And that you touched on urban heat island effect. It's real, and if we don't do it, we see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, related to some of the things that you were saying about our mental health, when our environments are stressful, even climate stressful, too much heat, too much cold, too many storms back to back, lots of flooding. This is all leading to a mental health crisis within our community when we have no control over our environments or what happens to our homes when these weather events happen. I can imagine that the stress of, that will get to us. I mean, and it's not going anywhere. So dealing with our mental health and using nature as a way to reset ourselves is, I think, a very important thing. Hopefully so much so that once we start using nature as a way to balm ourselves, that we will want to be in more stewardship and protection of the places that we draw this healing from. I want to take a couple of our audience questions. Let's see here. People don't understand how small the number of jobs are that this industry supports versus the impact to millions via climate change from worldwide logging. That's what Candace popped in. Can you talk a little bit more, Rolando, about some of the job opportunities that you see within your field that dispel the myth that the old jobs that we're holding on to, and coal and oil and big industry, those things are kind of making us believe that if we turn towards something else, jobs will be lost versus created. Can you bust that myth for us?
What came to mind, and I don't know if I'm answering the question with this, but what instantly came to mind is there is an asphalt company in McKinley Park that lauds itself, I won't name it, but lauds itself as environmentally sustainable, state of the art, and that's wonderful and all, but it's only about 10 people. And so there's a lot of pollution, there's a lot of neighborhood pushback as a result of it. But the fact that the numbers are low, the employment numbers are low versus the sheer magnitude of an asphalt company and the environmental degradation that it does, they could certainly be a better neighbor, to say the least. So the give and take as far as being a good neighbor, as far as what the local environment is getting versus what it's that doesn't align. Yeah, it's a really good question.
Yeah, and not one that we can actually answer over. I think that it's emerging. We're learning more about the jobs that are needed. And are emerging in the industries as we adapt them. Again, something you said earlier about how other countries are adapting this stuff and other communities are adapting innovation. That's where the jobs are. If we were watching, instead of arguing politically about whether or not we need to make these changes, if we embrace them, I make up that we would be able to see where these opportunities are and make them more visible. Do you see fairness in green job opportunities across the city in your work?
I think considering now that social justice and environmental justice are sort of the movements of the hour, I am seeing a little more effort. To what end that'll be, I don't know quite yet. I think we'll have a little more sense in a few years should the talent pool remain in these jobs. Because it's one thing to draw talent of color. It's the other thing to be conscious enough to retain them. We all have different needs. And so things like, I know that hair, I did a training for my employer where hair discrimination is an issue. And if some key little details like that, if they're not being conscious enough to be cognizant of the nuances that people of color deal with, I think that'll be an issue. But thanks to, I think every day people should give thanks to people like George Floyd, who gave their life lost their lives. But the after effect of that, with people of color getting more opportunities because of the light that shed on social justice conditions. Breonna Taylor is another one that without her, her death amplified what was going on. And so, I try to thank them and folks like them wherever we can, because without them, we'd still be discriminated against in a greater scale, no doubt.
No doubt, for sure. And grateful for not just their lives being an example of how we can consider more in space and consider who should, because a lot of times, lives are lost because there's this assumption that certain people belong in certain spaces and some don't. And so a lot of this could be avoided if we were to just change our minds about who we belong, what we believe belongs in a certain place. When we see a rabbit scurrying across the field, we don't say, that rabbit's not supposed to be there, because that's where deer are. And deer and rabbits are not supposed to be running across the same field, And so we don't question why nature produces what it produces in space. And if we could be in better observation of how that plays out socially, I think we could do a lot for each other.
Just think of what kind of environmental champion Trayvon could have been. But again, that you go back to, certain people don't belong in these spaces. Well, that's awful.
Yeah. So, a lot of the things that we're looking at on social media and these viral videos of people being confronted because someone's holding the idea that they don't belong in that particular space. And when we think about space equity, again, when we look at a tree, we don't think it's not supposed to be here. Or to Victor's point, some people do believe that those trees don't belong there. So I think that I would, invite us to really think about what we think belongs where, and challenge ourselves to reframe that. We do have one question. I'm not sure if you'll be able to take it. What can we do to stop clear cutting right here in Chicago? We talk a lot about the planting. I'm on the planting side of things. I'm always trying to get the seeds in the ground and get the trees in the ground. But oftentimes I don't think we talk about clear cutting. The idea of clear cutting in an urban environment always seems to be serving some purpose or someone. Can you shed a little light about what we do about that here? We have people who don't believe that our trees should be cut.
Two things that came to mind is one, someone in the comments touched on the political side of it. Voting is everything. And so being conscious of what positions electeds are taking as far as clear cutting, because Congress, they take things to vote, and a vote in Chicago, in this case, does matter. A vote in LA, plus a vote in Philly, plus a vote in New York, getting these electeds that are aligned with what you're thinking and networking. I would also advise network with folks that you're politically minded with, because the votes add up, and if enough of us are doing the work and letting it known we are not for clear cutting, that's one. And second is, I struggle with putting the blame on individuals with environmentalism, and I'll give you an example. So the first movie, the pre-movie, I suppose, was someone talking about the consumption and using plastic bottles. And I kind of have an issue with that, because when you think of transportation, when you think of industry, they're exponentially greater polluters. So my plastic cup of orange juice isn't going to put much of a dent. But then on the flip side of that, I'm looking at a display cabinet that I don't really use. It's fairly big, and that's all wood. So I am just as guilty with this. I have some TV trays that are also wood, so I'm adding to that. I'm looking at a television stand, also wood, so I'm very guilty of that as well. Do I need any of that? No, I don't need a display case. I have it here. It looks nice, but no, that's selfish, and I'm contributing to this as well. I am just as guilty as that. The TV tray here, I have a lap. I could put my laptop that I'm using now on my lap. It'd be perfectly fine. You'd see me just as well, but I'm also contributing to that. And so on one hand, I don't want to be too hard on people, but then also I recognize that I'm doing it too. It's a tough conversation, but certainly the political side we can do things about, and then really being conscious and having these conversations about our own personal consumption, I think is key.
Thank you. And that's a perfect segue, because I'm going to get more of that. What can we do out of you and out of our audience, hopefully? National Youth Poet Laureate of the United States, Amanda Gorman, called us to action in her poem, Earthrise. There is no rehearsal. The time is now, now, now. Earth, pale blue dot. We will fail you not. Right on. I am about Amanda Gorman. It's leading me to the final question. Let's take a few minutes to think about this idea of action. Rolando, you just gave us some great action directives to be mindful of our consumption, even though it's complicated, right? Because, I think everybody's got a role on the planet, from the corporations to the 2-year-old learning to consume the world for the first time. Everyone has a role here. And if we could take a few minutes to just poll, what actions can people take to be part of the solution? Can you suggest actions anyone could take? Actions communities, organizations, governments, or companies can take? Do you have any ideas here? And we'd also be looking for our audience to kind of pop into the chat and give us some of their ideas as well.
Reusing materials would be one. Definitely, I mentioned my cabinet that I don't need. I think it'd be better if it was like handed down or something multi-generational. Getting involved with your electeds, calling them, having spoken to some folks, when you tie up their lines, they do notice. When you blow them up on email, they do notice, and they don't want that. They don't want a negative light. And so being active on a political front, whatever side you align with, I'm not saying blue, red, I'm not saying that. Just be active and operate with conviction. Just if you, I went back to what your idea of environment is. Go with it. You don't compare the Redwood Forest to Lake Michigan to the Botanic Garden. What you see as your nature, your place in space, go with it, be a champion for it. I think that's what I'd encourage folks to do most.
Wonderful. Thank you. Let's see what some of our audience members have to say about buy from resale shops. Laura Dirks. Buy from resale shops. Commit to reusing clothes, utensils, shopping bags, furniture. No new production if it can be avoided. Laura Dirks also says, get outside in your local woodland. Yes, I'm all about it. If you're around the Chicago, Illinois area, of course, we have beautiful forest preserves and parks. And we also have this amazing, miraculous thing called Lake Michigan, which I can never get tired of. Let's see what else. A plastic bag, Monica Fox, plastic bags. Plastic is a big issue and is choking our oceans and lakes. Right on. I agree with you, Monica. Let's use less plastic. And join by nothing groups on Facebook is what Cindy G threw out. Right on, join groups. Support is necessary. We need to feel like we're part of a movement. One of the reasons I love One Earth is that it gives me a chance to be within a community of people who care about what I care about, which is the planet. So join some groups, keep them coming. Make sure that you are taking action. There's a ton of things that we can do to take action. One of the things that I would invite us to do is to breathe and meditate. Slow ourselves down, slow our brains down, slow our bodies down. It's hard to take and bear witness to something when we are full of anxiety and stress. And if we can just take a minute to just breathe and locate ourselves and slow ourselves down, we might be able to look up and out and see what might be going on around us besides just the stress and the thing that we live in every single day. Rolando, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'm disappointed with myself for not bringing this up earlier, but I do some research on the environmental side, and it is absolutely crucial. Please, I'm begging every one of you, if you see something, report it, whether it's 311, because if we don't have the data, if we don't know where the problems are, no one can do about it. No one can do a report on it. We can't hotspot map it. And so I love the Chicago and Cook County data portal. Whether it's pothole complaints, environmental complaints, please report it. You are not bothering people. We need that information. Please, please, please speak out. Be a champion for your community. Talk about that pothole. Talk about that down tree. Talk about that broken tree that could be replaced. And please, we don't have enough data. And you, being citizen science, will make all the difference in getting funding, in doing research. And because if they don't know what's happening, they can just turn the blinders on. Do not allow them to turn the blinders on, people, please.
Thank you, Rolando, for that. Get curious, y'all. Take them binoculars out. Y'all heard when Sam says whenever they saw a ship pull in, she got her binoculars out and she started watching where those wood logs are going. So be curious, look around and get curious when you see trucks with stuff and you see boats carrying things and you see loggers and you see garbage being dumped in certain areas. Get curious and report it. Thank you for that. One of the other things we would love for you to do is we would love for you to keep up this momentum by joining the One Earth Film Festival 6-week virtual book circle to keep the energy and conversation that we can turn the tide on our climate and social justice crisis by staying in connection with one another, studying together and voyaging together our stories. So be sure to check out the One Earth Film Festival website. I believe it's oneearthfilmfestival.org/all we can save the book circle with hyphens in between. But just check out the One Earth Film Festival site. I want to really give a big, huge thank you to our panelists, Rolando Favela with the Southeast Collective and Victor Short with Openlands. Thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to invite our audience to consider seeing more of our films. If you are ready to turn the tide on climate change, get involved. As we close out, I hope you feel called toward the One Earth's 11-year theme of turning the tide. Please share what you learned here today. Have conversations with your community. Keep this visible. Keep this conversation visible and alive within our communities. And that might be how we can turn the tide. Thank you again for joining us on this Saturday. I want you to enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thanks so much for joining us.